Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Steven, and for today's video I want to talk about something that is unfortunately not super exciting, but I feel like I have to do a video on it. So I'll keep it brief, but you can't have a brewing channel and not at some point make a video on how to clean and sanitize everything, because it's super important, right? I mean, probably it's the most important part of brewing, but it's also not the most exciting part. So I'll explain what I do. I'll keep it short, and hopefully it helps anybody that's new to home brewing or thinking about getting into home brewing, and gives you an idea where to go and what to use and when to use it. So let's get started, and we'll roll a theme tune, and I'll catch you on the other side. All right, everybody, welcome back to the other side of the theme tune of my intro. Thanks for sticking around. Let's start with reverse order here. I'm going to start with cleaning as opposed to sanitizing, because at the most part, if you're done with your whole fermenting or you're emptying your bottles because you've drank all your beer, and then you need to clean. So it's sort of the end of the process, but it's also what you do before you start actually using your brewing equipment. So there's two different kinds of cleansers I can think of that most homebrewers use. And we use them because we're basically trying to clean off any excess yeast, any excess debris that's in the fermenter or in the brew kettle or in your bottles. It's getting that organic physical matter out, right? And some things are harder to clean, like airlocks can be hard to clean. So here's the deal. You can use two items. I'm going to throw a picture up in one of the corners here of one of them, which is PBW. You can get this stuff at any homebrew store. You can order it online. In fact, if you want, I'll put a link in the description to an Amazon affiliate, meaning that I get well, right now I don't get anything, but at some point I might get a small little portion back that I can put back into the channel if you order it through that link. But it doesn't cost you anymore, right? So I'll put, I'll be honest too, this has nothing to do with this video, but the reason I really like using the affiliate links for Amazon isn't because I get money back, because at this point I really don't, but it allows me to put a shorter link. So I don't have like this 10-page URL that I'm putting in the description. It makes it a little tiny short link, nice and neat, and I think it looks just easier to read. Anyway, I'll put a link. I'll find a link for PBW. The deal is, it works great. You basically fill up your brew kettle or your bottle with warm water or whatever you're trying to clean, and then you put in the PBW and let it soak. And it will just eat away at any kind of stuff that's on it. Sort of like scrubbing bubbles, if you ever use that. It's not something you have to scrub and use a brush. Usually you can just put the cleaner in with the warm water, let it sit, and it will just do the job for you. The problem is PBW is rather expensive. And in my opinion, it's too expensive for what it is. You could go out and search for the actual chemical that it's using and just buy a generic from that. And I know people have done that, and you can buy it in bulk. Or there's another option. There's a product you can buy at the store that you can buy at just about any grocer, and it works just as well as PBW, and that is Oxyclean. Here's an example. In fact, this is what I've been using. Now, I bought this one because it's the only one that was on the shelf. It is not actually the one I normally buy, but it's what they had, and it looks like when I bought it, I thought, and I think it is, it's okay, but it's not the one I was really looking for. But here's the deal. I used to think OxyClean was ridiculous because if you're old like me, you'll remember the old OxyClean commercials where they're screaming and yelling at you in the commercial and telling you, buy this product and do this and do that. Remember Tony Little, like those exercise commercials where he would scream at you? Those were the OxyClean commercials. And I used to think, that stuff's never going to last. But here it is years later and people are still using it. It's an oxygenated cleaner. So when you add this to warm water, it activates it and it activates the oxygen and it bubbles. So that being said, don't put this in a spray bottle. It does activate when you put it with water, and it will create a pressure. And if you put it in a spray bottle, boom, right? So don't do that. Make sure whatever you put it in, it's open, and can bubble out if it needs to. OxyClean. So I put, follow the directions on the box on how much to use. Add it to hot water. I will tell you this. I tried putting it in cold water once, and it didn't do anything. It pretty much sat at the bottom, and then I went to rinse it out, and it was all just still sitting there at the bottom of the fermenter. So hot water and whatever amount it says to put in. And it says 30 minutes to however long you want to leave it. 30 minutes is the minimum. I just do it overnight. I'll throw it in a little bit in some bottles if I need to, or in your little, stick your airlock into, say, your fermenter that's full of hot water that you put this in, and let it get into the airlock and see if it can clean that out if it needs it. But I'm lazy. What I do is usually fill up everything I need to clean after a brewing session or whatever, and I soak it in OxyClean, and then throughout the week, I'll just slowly drain one thing at a time and rinse it out and whatnot. Always look for the, I wrote it down because officially the one you should get is OxyClean Free and Clear, I believe. Or maybe it's just OxyClean Free. Basically, it'll say on it that it has no dye and no perfume. This one doesn't say that because this is not the OxyClean Free. But this one does say chlorine free, so it won't have a chlorine smell or anything to it. It says safe on colors for laundry, so I think it's probably pretty much dye free. Anyway, you're basically looking for a cleanser that's not going to add any kind of scent, right, to your beer. You don't want scent to linger on the bottles and whatnot that you're cleaning, and then that scent gets into the beer, and it's like, you don't want that, right? It's the whole reason why we don't want chlorine in the water that we use for our beer, because we don't want our beer to have any kind of leftover chlorine sort of scent or flavor. So other than that, I thought there was something else I was going to mention about this. Oh, yes. So after you've used it, you've rinsed out your device. Sometimes when your bottles or your fermenter or whatever dry, it can have a little bit of a white sort of residue left behind by this stuff. Same thing with the PBW if you use that. So if you're worried about it, I think it's probably just a calcium, that's left behind. But if you're worried about it and you can't get it off, it just needs to be rinsed with an acid. So you could use a weak vinegar solution if you wanted to rinse, said items. The other option is you're going to sanitize most of your stuff anyway. The sanitizer you use will probably be an acid, and the sanitizer will do the same job like that vinegar would do. So if you spray it down with the sanitizer, that should also remove that thin layer of leftover calcium or whatever it is that's left over from the cleanser, if you're worried about it. All right, so sanitizing. So I don't have a lot left, and it's in this horrible, nasty bag because I had so this is what I use for sanitizing. All right, I use Star San, which is what most homebrewers use. I have had problems with it, though, as far as the container. These lids sometimes crack or break. The idea is you're supposed to be able to squeeze the bottle, and it will fill up this little container on this side so that you can basically measure how much you need to dilute it into water. The problem is it gets cracked or whatever, or these don't seal anymore. The lids don't seal anymore, and then it doesn't work. I do have a solution for that, which is you take both these lids off like this, right? And then you just put your hand over the top of one side, and then you can squeeze with one hand and it'll fill up. But as you can see, I put it in a plastic bag because, you know, it could, it's just, you don't want it to leak everywhere. And anyway, that's neither here nor there. Star San is going to be available like on Amazon. Again, I'll put an affiliate link in the description if you want to link to it. If you're looking for it there, it's going to be available at every homebrew store. It's a no-rinse sanitizer, which means you don't rinse it, just like the name says. Which can be a little discerning if you've never used it before, because when you use this, it does sort of bubble or foam. It's not really foam. It's more like blowing like the old bubbles you get as a kid. But it's pretty severe. Like even with cold water, if you shake like whatever it's in, it is going to just bloom with bubbles. There is this slogan that everybody who's used this knows, and I'm sure if you've used it, it's going to be, you know, old hat to you, which is don't fear the foam. And it's not really foam, it's bubbles. But the deal is that the chemical, whatever it is that they use in here, I could look it up, but I'm not gonna. It's a natural sort of occurring chemical that sanitizes. So it's not something that, you know, in small amounts is going to cause you harm if it's consumed. I wouldn't go and just drink this stuff straight, but if a small amount of like bubbles and foam are left behind, it's designed that way. You literally pour your wort right on top of it. Or if you're bottling, you bottle right on top of that foam. It's okay. It's not going to hurt anything. In fact, because of the type of chemical it is, it actually sort of acts as a small amount of nutrient for your yeast. So it actually could be slightly helpful. There's not a lot in it, so I don't think it makes a big difference. But if anything, it's helpful to your yeast as far as that goes. So when to use it, how to use it. So there's this term you're going to learn when it comes to homebrewing, which is the hot side and the cold side. The hot side being everything up to the point where you're boiling, right? You're going to end up boiling your wort for an hour or however long you do your boil. So everything up to that point through the boil, you don't have to sanitize because the heat from boiling is going to sanitize for you. Once you turn the heat off and you're no longer heating anything, now you have to sanitize every single thing that comes in contact with that liquid from that point on. So your fermenter, your airlock, your bung, your cylinder that you put your sample in, your hydrometer, everything else gets sanitized. So the deal is that you're supposed to leave it in contact with Star San for at least 30 seconds for it to sanitize. So if you have a big, let's say you make 2 gallons or however much you make of this stuff, right, on your brew day. The first thing I always do when I make up a batch like that is I take a spray bottle or maybe 2 and I fill it up and I set it aside. That can be used. So even though this is cold and it's been sitting here for a few weeks in this spray bottle, it's still viable. It's still good. It still sanitizes just as well. So how do you know when this goes bad and you can no longer use it? It will get cloudy. So if this starts to turn cloudy, dump it out and make a new, put a new batch in. You supposedly can rejuvenate it with by adding, like mixing it with fresh Star San, but in my opinion, at that point, just dump it and get a new batch in there. So the spray bottle's nice because you can just spray the inside of a bottle if you want. You can spray down your airlock, and remember, it just takes 30 seconds, and then so leave it in that bottle for 30 seconds, and then just shake out as much as you can, and you're ready to use it. Make sure you get spots that are hard to get to. If you have a fermenter with a spigot, make sure that you take the spigot apart and you spray it out and clean it and sanitize it and put it back together. Believe it or not, yeah, those things, spigots are a huge point of infection in brews. So a lot of times people neglect the spigot on their fermenter or their brewing device, and then they end up getting an infection. Make sure before you turn the spigot to empty stuff, turn the sprayer upside down and spray up inside the spigot as best you can. Whatever you can do to try to sanitize. There is a point where you cannot really do anything further. So it's basically what we call best practices. So you may end up sanitizing a bunch of things, and then you need to set them out somewhere just to sit before you can grab and use them. So you put them on a nice clean towel. Okay, well, the towel's not sanitized. All right? What about your hands? Did you sanitize your hands? There are people, I see this all the time in brewing videos, that sanitize the yeast packet itself and the scissors they use to open the yeast packet. They put them both in the sanitizer solution. I'm sorry, but I draw the line at that point, okay? I don't sanitize. I've never sanitized my yeast packet or the scissors, if I even need to use scissors. Usually yeast packets have a little like tear thing. You can just tear it. I never have, and I've never had an infection, ever. So you do have to decide for yourself where you're going to draw the line on sanitizing stuff. At some point, you have to say, I've done the best I can, to keep things as sanitary as possible, So do what you can. I will say the only other tip I can give on sanitizing is that it is recommended that you do not, if you do mill your own grain, don't mill it in the same room that you brew. Apparently it's very easy for it to get into the air. If you've ever watched my videos, and maybe I'll link to it in my thing here on my grain and when I'm milling, I wear a mask. I wear an N95 mask, and it looks silly and everything on the video, but it is such a fine powder that just lifts up into the air when you're milling. It gets into my lungs, and so I have to wear a mask or I'll be coughing horribly for several days if I don't. So imagine if it's that bad in the air, it can easily waft its way over to your brew kettle or your fermenter and cause an infection because it's not sanitized, right? So that's a huge recommendation from people is, if you're going to mill your own grain, try to do it somewhere that's separate from where you actually make your beer and do your fermentation. Let me look at my list. I think that's pretty much it. So Oxyclean or PBW. Use hot water when you use the Oxyclean, or else it won't dissolve. Don't put Oxyclean in a spray bottle because it will build up pressure. We talked about Star San, when to use it, how to use it, when does it go bad, and replacing it. I guess the last thing I didn't talk about, I have one more note on my notes, and that's bleach. So I've been homebrewing for like several decades, and when I first started, close to 20 years ago, we didn't have Star San, or if we did, it was not easy to get, or it was like cost prohibitive. Everybody used bleach back then, and it was not very effective. You have to look it up and find out what the ratio is. How much bleach do you put to how many gallons of water? So it's a diluted bleach solution. And then how long do you have to leave stuff in the solution before it's sanitized? And then the problem is you have to rinse it off really well because, as we talked about, bleach is a very strong odor, and you don't want that odor in your finished beer product. So you have to rinse everything off that you've put in the bleach solution, or else it's going to smell and add a bleach taste, right, to your beer. But once you start rinsing it off, you've basically unsanitized what you just sanitized. So it's really difficult to use bleach as a sanitizer effectively. I can recall having lots of infections from making beer using bleach as the sanitizer. It's not a great solution. If you have no other choice, it is what we used to use, and so if you live somewhere where you cannot get a real sanitizing solution, then you can do bleach, but you have to be even more meticulous about making sure everything is as sanitary as possible, because it's not a great solution because you really have to rinse it off. Otherwise, it really does impart bleachy sort of smell and taste to your beer that it's not something you want. So That's my opinion on bleach. So that's what I've got for you for today. I hope that wasn't too painful, and maybe it helps some people as far as how to use sanitizer, how to use cleanser, what to use, where to get it. And I will, of course, as always, post a little video of another video you could watch up in the top corner here, because I have other videos. I put out a video about every week regarding something to do with home brewing of some sort or another. Make sure you check out my home brewing full day videos. I have a couple of those out, and I, of course, will be continuing to put those out as I finish editing them and posting them. And otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel if you hit the like button, because it gets more people, more visibility to the channel. And, you know, I appreciate it. Make sure you put a comment. I like to hear from people. I haven't gotten a lot of comments of late, so if you're making something, if you have a different way of sanitizing that works really well for you, or a tip, I'd love to read about that in the comments. We can always learn from each other in the brewing community. That's one thing I could say, is that the brewing community is amazing, that people share their information. People, even big breweries, oftentimes share their recipes and their information, and they always are willing to give tours. And it's an amazing industry, and just a group of people willing to share in order to grow and build on it. So that being said, thanks for coming. Thanks for staying. Can't wait to see you next time. And man, keep on brewing.